The Rules Committee will come to order. We are here for further consideration of S. 627, and the Chair will be in receipt of a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee report a closed rule for S. 627, the Faster FOIA Act of 2011. The rule provides 2 hours of debate with 1 hour equally divided and controlled by the Chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Rules, 30 minutes equally divided and controlled by the Chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Ways and Means, and 30 minutes equally divided and controlled by the Chair and ranking minority member on the Committee on the Budget. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment in the nature of a substitute printed in Part A of the Rules Committee report accompanying the resolution, modified by the amendment printed in Part B of the report, shall be considered as adopted. The bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended. The rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions. The rule further authorizes the Speaker to entertain motions to suspend the rules at any time through Sunday, July 31, 2011, if the measure was made available on the previous legislative day. The rule provides 2 hours of debate on motions to suspend the rules related to a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. The rule sets the dates for the convening of the House for the anticipated pro forma sessions during the period from August 1, 2011 through September 6, 2011, and provides that the Speaker may dispense with legislation business for these pro forma sessions and declare the House adjourned to a time on the next pro forma session day. The rule provides for approval of the journal during pro forma sessions from August 1, 2011 through September 6, 2011. The rule provides that days during the period from August 1, 2011 through September 6, 2011 shall not constitute a calendar day for the purposes of the War Powers Resolution. Finally, the rule provides that the Speaker may delay the referral of introduced measures from August 1, 2011 through September 6, 2011.
You've heard the motion of the gentleman from Dallas. Let me explain where we are. As we know very well, last night when we recessed, we had just received, as was pointed out in the hearing, a letter from the Congressional Budget Office which raised scoring concerns. The rule that we have tonight provides for consideration of the House amendment contained in the Budget Control Act to a Senate bill, as we discussed last night, which will allow, because of the fact that we're dealing with such extraordinarily dire circumstances, the August 2nd date, by which time we need to increase the debt ceiling approaching. We want there to be an opportunity for expeditious consideration in the Senate. So that's the reason that we are using the structure that we are right now. The amendment that we made available Monday evening will be further modified by the revised amendment that's been on our website, which addresses our scoring issues that were raised, creates a new point of order against violation of discretionary spending caps, and makes a few other technical changes. Now, that amendment was made available to the minority and posted on our website at 5:50 this evening. And we know that this is a closed rule, but the minority will still be allowed, even though it is a closed rule, still be allowed an amendment in the form of a motion to recommit. It also provides for consideration measures under suspension of the rules, as Mr. Sessions has said, through the weekend, although nothing may be brought up under suspension unless the text has been available for at least 1 day prior. Now, there was a lot of discussion here yesterday about the balanced budget amendment. I should say that we fully expect the balanced budget amendment that we posted on our website to be debated. There may be other alternatives considered under the same process as well. We do in this rule provide an extension of the debate time for the possibility of a balanced budget amendment being considered under suspension of the rules. The list of the suspensions that will be considered will be made available by the majority leader. And as Mr. Sessions said at the end of his motion, recognizing that we are not going to be able to pass an adjournment resolution, we in fact do provide for the structure that will be necessary for the House to continue in session through the month of August. Any discussion or amendment to the motion of the gentleman?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I would like to propose an amendment to the rule. I move the committee grant S. 627 an open rule so that all members may have the opportunity to offer amendments to the bill of the hour. This is a most important legislative event taking place here, which will also perhaps include a balanced budget amendment to change the Constitution of the United States, and I would like us all to be able to provide amendments to this legislation.
Well, you've heard the motion.
Chair.
Gentlewoman, let me just say that, if I could respond, let me just say that this rule allows for the consideration of measures under suspension of the rules. This does not deal with a balanced budget amendment. The only thing that it does, it extends the debate time, if there is a debate on a balanced budget amendment, so that more members will, in fact, have an opportunity to participate. And we know that we are dealing with time constraints here, as I think anyone who has been following this is well aware. It's important that we move as quickly as possible. We do want to ensure that there will be adequate debate time on the House floor, but I'm going to encourage my colleagues to oppose the notion of taking this Senate bill with our amendment and having it considered on an open amendment process. Mr. Polis.
Thank you. Again, given that this bill has not been through any legislative committees, has not been the subject of any hearings, I think an open rule should be made in order, and I will therefore be supporting this motion. I also want to inquire again. We discussed yesterday who was the sponsor of the bill, and I think that the chairman claimed the bill. I asked the same thing with regard to the amendment. I'd like to inquire again. There's no name on this amendment that sort of appeared on our desk, and I'd like to inquire as to who is the sponsor of this amendment to the bill.
The Rules Committee is putting this in place in its report. This is something that is done by tradition, has been done by both political parties many, many times, and that's the way this is being
So
handled.
to be clear again, I think, are you saying that there's no member that is the sponsor of this amendment?
This is being done by the Rules Committee. I'm the chairman of the Rules Committee. If the gentleman wants to, as you all associate me with that, you're certainly welcome to.
So this would be the Dreyer amendment to the Dreyer bill.
You're welcome to characterize it in any way you want, because I know there's nothing that I can do to say one way or the other how you're going to characterize
And
it.
I would just argue that given that the chairman has the opportunity to amend his own bill, I hope he can afford the rest of us that opportunity as well. One point of personal privilege I'd like to introduce. We have a number of young people here who are students at Princeton University that are doing internships on the Hill, my alma mater, and across different parts of our federal government, and they are observing the sausage making and process and learning about it here today. So I'll yield to the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you for yielding. And I guess my question is that.
Could I welcome the students from Princeton before? Let me just thank my friend. And my grandfather was a Princeton alumnus, and I know that there is a wonderful tradition there. It's a great institution that I've had the opportunity to visit, and I have, including Mr. Polis, many great friends who are alumni of Princeton University. And so welcome. I hope you all have enjoyed your internship here. And I guess now that I've gone through all that, I get to hear from Mr. McGovern. So,
I would just add that
welcome.
I would like to add that one of our and one of them is interning in the office of our former Rules Committee colleague Doris Matsui. So I wanted to highlight that.
Wonderful.
I'll yield to the
Wonderful.
gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you for yielding, and I want to welcome you again.
Good.
Let me, since, Mr. Chairman, since you're claiming authorship of this.
Well, let me just say, if
well,
the gentleman yield just briefly, I was just reminded by staff that Senator Leahy is the author of this bill that we have before us. So,
Yeah, well, the bill.
Senator Leahy is the author.
I would again, reclaiming my time briefly, a senator cannot be the author of a House bill.
This happens to be not a House bill. This is a Senate bill.
I believe that there was something regarding speeding the Freedom of Information Act, which I believe that, having briefly looked at this bill, again, I understand we have to pass the bill to know what's in it, but I'm fairly confident in saying that there is no expedited Freedom of Information Act processes in this bill currently.
In the Leahy bill?
The current Leahy
bill.
The Leahy bill, I believe, does no longer, in fact, expedite the Freedom of Information Act request, perhaps indeed a worthy cause and one worthy of debate in the appropriate legislative committee. But I don't believe that the Senate author of it would recognize the House Dreyer Amendment or the House Dreyer Amendment to the Dreyer Amendment. And I'll yield to the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you for yielding again. And I guess my question is, about this amendment that we're being presented with tonight. I'm not quite sure what it means. I know that the chairman said that it helps kind of get the numbers in sync with CBO and where the speaker wants this bill to go. But I guess my question is, what does this mean for Social Security or for Medicare or for Pell Grants or for roads and bridges or for student loans or any of this stuff? I mean, last night the chairman of the Budget Committee was not made available, so we had a tough time trying to ascertain the true human cost of what we're doing here today. But this amendment, there's billions of dollars that are cited here, billions. It must impact somebody. And I'm just wondering whether the gentleman from California, the chairman of the Rules Committee, can tell us specifically what is impacted by this amendment to the bill.
And reclaiming my time, I'll be happy to yield to the chair in a moment to answer that. And I would just add, in fact, we need to pass this bill to know what's in it, or perhaps the chairman can, in fact, inform us as to how this bill affects Social Security, Medicare, and the questions from the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Well, as you all know, last night when we received the letter, and this is the one entity that has actually put forward a proposal that has been scored by the Congressional Budget Office, we found there was a disparity between the $1.2 trillion and the $850. This ends up being $917 billion in savings as opposed to the $1.2 trillion in savings that had been anticipated. And the language that is provided here addresses that issue. And I will say that as far as a negative impact on Social Security or Medicare, there is no negative impact on these programs. In fact, when it comes to Pell Grants, as my friend knows, there is a bipartisan commitment to the Pell Grant program. And in fact, there ends up being an increase in the level of support for the Pell Grant program. But at the same time, we do have an opportunity to see significant savings. And so this measure will, there are a number of technical changes that we can get into that frankly, I suspect, can be discussed. And our staffs, I know that our staff director has been in touch with yours in going through this process. And so we want this resolved. I will say further that the notion of saying that we're characterizing this and using the Pelosi model of passing it before you know what is in it, I think that we have something called the 3-day layover requirement, which was regularly waived, that we are doing our doggonedest to adhere to, and we have done so in this case. I thank my friend for yielding.
Thank the gentleman. Reclaiming my time. Again, we're here with a multi-trillion dollar. I think there's some question about the size of it, and now with the new scoring, there's the Dreyer amendment to the Dreyer bill. It's perhaps a different size, but $1 trillion bill, 2 hours of the debate on the floor, not a single hearing, not a single committee markup, and again, I don't know if it's a Dreyer model or what it is, but I think this pass it to know what's in it is very much what's being done here. I'll be happy to yield, gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yeah, again, I don't mean to be a pest about this, but I'm just trying to.
No, go ahead.
I'm just trying to figure out. I mean, billions and billions of dollars are being cut. It must impact something. It just can't, I mean, something has to be adversely impacted. Maybe it's things you don't like, but I'd just like to know, is it Social Security? Is it Pell Grants? Is it student financial assistance? Is it environmental protection? Is it, roads and bridges? I mean, community development block grants? This must, I mean, this must mean something.
I'll be happy to yield to the chair.
Well, will there be some point where you'll allow me to recognize myself, or?
Yeah, I haven't concluded my comments yet.
Okay.
But
Why don't you conclude your comments, and then I'll start responding. When you conclude, I'll seize the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, gentlemen, and I'll encourage the chair to also, again, answer Mr. McGovern's question about what is being cut. I mean, there's actually many cuts that my colleague from Massachusetts and I agree on, namely some of the excess defense expenditures and reducing these unnecessary wars and bringing some of our troops home. And again, it doesn't make explicit mention of that in there. But what does this mean? Again, I think we're in the situation where we have to pass the bill to know what's in it. Are we cutting the military? Are we cutting Social Security? Are we cutting food stamps? Are we increasing Pell Grants, as the chair said? Again, there's great uncertainty in this body with regard to this last-minute trillion dollar bill that hasn't had a single hearing, a single markup, and is subject only to debate here tonight, and will be brought forth to the House under a proposed closed rule unless this amendment passes, the Slaughter Amendment, which I strongly support, and I call upon my colleagues to support the Slaughter Amendment. Again, to have the Dreyer Amendment to the Dreyer bill, trillion-dollar bill, that will cut something that the gentleman from Massachusetts is trying to figure out what it cuts, as am I. And I would encourage this to be done, if it has to be done because of some deadline, under at least an open process that will enable others, perhaps myself and others on both parties, to offer amendments just as the chair has offered the Dreyer Amendment. We would like to enjoy that same ability to offer amendments to this bill. And therefore, I'll strongly support the Slaughter Amendment, and I'll be happy to yield back in hopes that the gentleman can address some of the gentleman from Massachusetts and my questions.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the gentleman's very thoughtful questions. There are a number of things I'd like to go through in response to both of you. First, we are here because by August 2nd, at the request of the President of the United States, we want to increase the debt ceiling. And over the past several weeks and months, there have been discussions that have taken place, and I'm not going to get into characterizing any of them one way or other, who was where, but we are where we are right now. And I think Democrat and Republican alike, we recognize that August 2nd is approaching. And there is an imperative that we take action. Now, I've been through countless increases in the debt ceiling in the 3 decades that I've been privileged to serve here, and we've seen increases in the debt ceiling take place many years before that. Never before in the history of the Republic have we seen a debt ceiling vote take place which actually has focused on getting at the root cause of why it is that the debt ceiling needs to be increased, and that is bringing about a reduction in spending. This measure has broad guidelines without the kind of specificity that my friend has raised concerns about. But let me just throw out a couple of items that were raised in the Biden talks that took place. And there was agreement on a number of areas of spending reductions. And frankly, talking with the ranking member of the Agriculture Committee, the former chairman of the Agriculture Committee, this was something that came, and he explained this to me, how it came about, but he talked about the SNAP program, the food stamp program. And one of the things that was discovered, and there was a bipartisan consensus to deal with this issue in the Biden talks, was that if one simply qualifies for the low-income heating assistance program, LIHEAP, which I know is something that's very near and dear to my friend from Worcester and my friend from Rochester as well, and to lots of people, that if someone qualifies for the LIHEAP program, they automatically qualify for food stamps. Well, it seems to me that there should be, maybe they are deserving of food stamps. Maybe they're deserving of food stamps, but Colin Peterson and others, and this was something agreed to in the Biden talks, that they would focus on the reduction of spending there. Similarly, under the Temporary Assistance to Needy Families, the TANF program, if someone simply goes in for a 30-minute counseling under the TANF program, they automatically qualify for food stamps. Well, again, maybe that person is deserving of food stamps. Maybe they are necessary. But the notion of saying there is an automatic granting of food stamps for someone who has simply received counseling under the TANF program or qualified for the LIHEAP program is just an example. Now, I'm not saying that in this measure that kind of specificity exists. We have the broad guidelines that are put forward and a level of spending that has been, frankly, agreed to in a number of areas through the Biden talks, some with the President, some with Senator Reid, and those are going to be targets and goals that we will put forward with some mechanisms that will ensure the enforcement mechanisms that are to guarantee that we do, in fact, proceed with the actual spending reductions that I believe are going to be necessary if we're going to be able to maintain our credit rating and as a nation in this global economy, be as successful as we are today, and I hope will be in the future. And I know my friend from Boulder is a very strong proponent of our global leadership role, and we have spent a great deal of time talking about that, and I'm hoping that we will be able to be successful here. And I'm happy to yield to anyone who'd like to ask
I
a
just want,
question.
we're not going to get any specific answers here, but I don't want I don't want this hearing to go on with anyone under the impression that somehow that there's this massive fraud, waste, and abuse in the SNAP program, and that people are getting it in large numbers that shouldn't be. If you qualify,
Well, I can reclaim my
Well,
time.
if you-
I will
if you
simply say that
qualify
I was
for-
just quoting.
No, I
I was
know, but
just
if you
quoting
qualify for
Colin
NIDA,
Peterson, the
you're
ranking
poor.
member.
You
I was
know?
quoting
Right.
Colin
Well,
Peterson,
and
the ranking
well,
member
and
of the
I-
Agriculture
and I-
Committee, who was the chairman of the Agriculture
and I would-
Committee, and I've discussed this.
I'd also say
I'm happy
that.
to further yield to my
Thank you. I'd also say that the GAO did an audit of the SNAP program, and it's one of the best-run government programs that we have. And in fact, the error rate that is cited, a big portion of that error rate is underpayments to people. So but I guess this goes to the point. One of the things that I'm really frightened about what we're doing here is that the cuts are going to be aimed disproportionately at poor people and at vulnerable people, at senior citizens, and I think that's...
Well, if I could reclaim my time, as I said, this was something that was agreed to by the Vice President of the United States in the Biden talks, and I simply put this forward as an example. And I also made it very clear that I believe that people who are truly in need should qualify and receive the benefits of food stamps. What I said is there were two instances, one relating to the LIHEAP program, the other relating to the TANF program. And those examples that I used are things that I believe in a bipartisan way we can work to address to ensure that those people about whom my friend and I are, and all of us are concerned, will actually get the benefits that are necessary, and we won't have the kinds of problems that both Democrats and Republicans alike have acknowledged exist with both the TANF and the LIHEAP programs as it relates to food stamps. And I'm going to urge my colleagues to oppose the amendment of my friend from Rochester, and those in favor of the Slaughter amendment will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
Roll call,
Any of the
please.
chair, and, well, let me say, I think the noes have it, but
That's fine, I'm sure they do. They always do. I'd like a roll call.
and Ms. Slaughter, unless we're passing out a rule,
Okay.
then the ayes have it. But anyway, clerk will report the total. Yeah, okay. Clerk call the
Mr.
roll.
Sessions.
Yeah, I was just rushing ahead.
Mr. Sessions votes no. Ms. Fox.
No.
Ms. Fox votes no. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop votes no. Mr. Woodall. No. Mr. Woodall votes no. Mr. Nugent. No. Mr. Nugent votes no. Mr. Scott. No. Mr. Scott votes no. Mr. Webster. No. Mr. Webster votes no. Ms. Slaughter.
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter votes aye. Mr. McGovern.
Aye.
Mr. McGovern votes aye. Mr. Hastings.
Aye.
Mr. Hastings votes aye. Mr. Polis.
Aye.
Mr. Polis votes aye. Mr. Chairman.
No. Now the clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
And the amendment is not agreed to. Are there further amendments? Mr. McGovern.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule. I move to change the provision in the rule that gives 1 day's notice for suspension bills so that any amendment to the United States Constitution being considered under suspension, the joint resolution will be available for 3 legislative days. And I'd like a moment to be able to speak on it if I
Please
could.
proceed.
When we began this new Congress, you talked about Speaker talked about 72 hours that we would have to review legislation, and then that then got interpreted as 3 days, which didn't necessarily have to be 72 hours. Now we're being told 1 day, and we don't know if that's 24 hours or 12 hours or what constitutes 1 day by this definition. And we are talking about something that, quite frankly, a vote on a constitutional amendment is not absolutely necessary, or it is not necessary at all to avert this debt ceiling crisis. It could happen, in 3 days after you decide to introduce it. But we're talking about amending the Constitution of the United States, and a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution has been considered in the House on 5 occasions. The last time Democrats brought it up was in 1994. There were 11 hours of debate and 5 alternatives in addition to the base text. The last time the Republicans brought it up in 1995, they allowed 9 hours of debate and 6 substitutes. This rule allows the House to consider a balanced budget amendment that no one has ever seen. And I think if I'm interpreting your comments right, it might be more than one balanced budget amendment. It could be a number of them, but no one has seen it. We think it might be the one that's printed on the Rules Committee website, but we can't be sure. But we're told that we're going to vote on something that we're not sure of right now what it's going to be, with 2 hours of debate, no alternatives allowed, and not even a motion to recommit. And I just want to my colleagues in the Rules Committee, I just want to quote Speaker Boehner, who, and I quote, "If I am lucky enough to be Speaker, I will not bring a bill to the floor that hasn't been posted online for at least 72 hours," end quote. Mr. Boehner did not say 72 hours unless, of course, it's a constitutional amendment that is considered under the suspension of the rules. He said very clearly that I will not bring a bill to the floor that hasn't been posted online for at least 72 hours. And my colleagues, my Republican colleagues, made a big deal about reading the Constitution on the House floor, about telling us how much they hold the Constitution in high regard. And here we are, talking about amending the Constitution of the United States, not knowing what it is we're going to be voting on, giving us a day, which could be 24 hours or it could be significantly less, and we're going to have a debate, for a very short period of time with no alternatives. I mean, the Constitution, I think, deserves better than that, and I hope my colleagues, my Democratic colleagues and my Republican colleagues will both support my amendment to the rule.
Mr. Polis.
I strongly support Mr. McGovern's amendment, and I say that as somebody who supports a balanced budget amendment. As I mentioned to this committee the other day, when I was first elected to Congress, it wasn't something I supported. I thought Congress should balance a budget. I've since come to the conclusion that Congress won't balance the budget unless we're required to. My colleague, Mr. Cuellar, has a balanced budget amendment that I would likely be supportive of. I'm a co-sponsor of a balanced budget amendment with Mr. Amash. I have no idea what balanced budget amendment is brought up under this bill. Amending the Constitution is a very serious thing to do. It's a very serious responsibility we have in Congress. It's beyond passing a simple statute. It's our governing document. A one-day period of time to review unknown numbers of constitutional amendments. The Chair alluded to the fact there could very well be several. We don't know what they say, what they do. How are we to make a decision on the underlying bill, the Dreyer bill, if we don't know what balanced budget amendment is to be considered under this bill, or at least have the adequate time to examine that amendment or amendments that are brought forth under the bill? As, again, somebody that would like to see a balanced budget amendment become part of our Constitution, I don't see how this is a part of the process that would lead to that. In fact, to the contrary, this seems like by its nature, a constitutional amendment requires votes from both parties, requires 2/3. We are bringing this up in a partisan way as part of a partisan effort that attracts little to no Democratic support, rather than working together to try to require Congress to balance the budget each year, which in the past many members of my caucus have supported. So I think, again, I think we could go even further than the McGovern amendment and specify the balance of budget amendment that would be considered under this, but I strongly support, and I think it's very reasonable to support my colleague from Massachusetts' motion to at least say, to amend the Constitution, especially since we don't know how many amendments we're looking at, we would have 3 days to consider those, and I urge my colleagues to support the McGovern amendment. I yield back.
Let me just say that, as you know, measures that are considered on the House floor under suspension of the rules under both political parties come to the floor with literally 1 hour of notification. And nothing can pass this House under suspension of the rules without a 2/3 majority. And I think that the argument that you're making about the gravity of the constitutional amendment is a valid one, and so I'm going to encourage my colleagues to support the McGovern amendment.
I want to thank the chair for his recommendation.
I don't know, we haven't had a vote on it yet, so I'm just saying I'm encouraging my colleagues to support it. We'll see what happens here. Any further discussion? If not, the vote occurs on the McGovern amendment. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. My gosh, the McGovern amendment did, in fact, fail. So, congratulations, Mr. Mayor. Are there further amendments? If not,
Chairman,
Mr. Hayes.
I don't have an amendment, but I do wish to make a very brief comment. In my opinion, yesterday, we were in accounting la-la land. And today, in my opinion, we are in gimmicky land. This is a gimmick. And in my view, then I gather that it is a new and not improved la-la gimmick. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, could I be
Yes.
could I be heard on that as the Rules Committee representative to the Budget Committee, Mr. Hastings? And you know, I've always found you I've enjoyed our dialogues over our 7 months here. But to describe what happened yesterday as budget gimmickry,
Yesterday, la-la.
I'm sorry, as Lala, I thank the gentleman. I thank the gentleman for correcting that. I have to say, I don't know how the House was run before I got here 7 months ago, but what happened yesterday was a bill was brought to this committee that was scored by the Congressional Budget Office using their January baseline, and those numbers were presented to each and every one of us as scored by the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office using their January baseline. Then it became apparent to folks that the new March baseline was going to change those numbers. And instead of rushing that bill to the floor, as I know has happened in this body over and over and over again, this leadership team said no. You know what? Slow down. We have an opportunity to do it the right way. And so to describe taking a step backwards so we can do it the right way as la-la, I mean, perhaps it is, given the near totalitarian way this institution has been run in years past. But I could not be more proud as a freshman member of this body that we didn't force it through because it's my way or the highway. We said, this is serious. There's a right way and a wrong way to do it. Let's do it the right way. I'd be happy to yield the gentleman.
Yeah, all I want to say to you is I'm deeply appreciative of the fact that you and I and others on this committee have had extraordinary dialogue and fundamental disagreements, and yet respectful of the positions that we take. I've been here 18 more years than have you. Mm-hmm. And toward that end, I want you to know that there are occasions where the majority has taken a CBO score and said, "Oh, that's crazy," and then you can't have it when you want it, and then don't have it when you need it, and that's what has happened here. You are a critic of the institution from time to time and its transparency, and so am I. And I gather that we will continue to have that dialogue. But this is an example where you like the CBO, and I've seen many examples that you have not, where your party didn't like the CBO, and I might add, mine has been on both sides.
You're exactly right, Mr. Hastings. So again, that's why I speak out. That is not what has happened here, and it does this process a disservice to suggest that that is what happened. It did not go back to CBO for gimmickry, and it did not come back from CBO with the score that folks wanted. It just came back from CBO with the score that it got. It went through one time under a January baseline, one time under a March baseline, and we just got what we got. And in fact, no, it went the other direction. I mean, it went the bad direction. I wanted it to go the other way. If there's a time to rail out, it would be now. But I don't want anybody to take what has happened here and say this is an example of what not to do. What I want to tell you, as someone who's new to the institution, this is an example of what to do? And will that partisan nonsense that you described continue to go on? I suspect it will, despite both of our protestations.
Gentlemen, yield.
But I don't think that's what happened here today, and I'd be happy to yield to my friend.
And again, my objection with this process is that you brought this bill before the Rules Committee yesterday, and then we have an amendment here today, and nobody can tell me what programs are going to be impacted, what the human cost is.
Gentleman yield.
Yeah, when I finish, you know, what the, you know, I mean, I think that, you know, this is more than just about, you know, a process, it's about policy.
Right.
And I mean, the chairman of the Budget Committee wasn't even here yesterday.
Well-
I know that you're on the Budget Committee, but
And reclaiming my time, let me answer that question, because to continue to pose it as if it's actually a question, again, surprises me. I am a huge proponent of regular order in this body, and go to bat time and time again to preserve regular order. And so if you tell me, let's post things on the web for 72 hours, and we post these things on the web, clearly you have not read this bill, Mr. McGovern. Because if you did, you would know good and well that there's not a single Social Security cut in this entire program. There's not a single Medicare reduction in this entire program.
What is
and
cut?
it's spelled out 16
cut?
pages.
what is cut?
It's capped.
Well, you
It's capped.
Well,
and I can direct you
I
to
strongly disagree with them that somehow Social Security and Medicare are protected. They are not.
16
And
pages.
every
Reclaiming my
analysis-
time,
sir.
reclaiming my time. That's why we put these things out there. And I'm glad you're asking the question, because I've got the answers.
Don't.
And for anybody who's wondering, let me tell them right now. Let me tell them right now. If you want to know what the priorities are in this bill, you go back and look at H.R. 1, the single most open continuing resolution debate this institution has ever had, and you will see our funding priorities there. If you want to know where we want to go back and look at the April budget debate, where we proudly debated in this House every single budget resolution that was brought to the floor of this House. Every single budget resolution that was brought to the floor of this
That's
House.
why this is the closed
And
rule.
we share those priorities. And what this bill does, now, granted,
It's a closed rule.
coming from one of the most conservative parts of the country, I might have rather gone with a my way or the highway approach on this, because I'm pretty sure I'm right on this, and I'm pretty sure some of the other folks are wrong. But instead of that, I lost that debate. Instead of that, what this bill went with is let's bring it to this institution, and guess what? Let's have some 302A allocations where the House and the Senate can actually come to conference on an appropriations bill. Wouldn't that be neat? Now, I know you hadn't seen that in this institution in the last how many years has it been? Is it 4 now that we haven't had
I've never seen anything
302As?
as draconian as this since I've been here.
And by draconian, you mean having the first time in half a decade that 302A allocations will apply to both sides of the bill.
By pushing more
Again,
people into poverty.
A step
That's what I mean. More
forward,
people into poverty.
not a step backwards. And again,
Social Security and Medicare.
that's the only reason I speak up, Mr. Chairman, is because I just could not be more proud. And this is the right way to do it, and I hope we do it this way again and again and again and again, and I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also refer the gentleman to page 39, where the membership of this committee that is going to make these recommendations is laid out. Lays it out, the designations of members of a joint committee. We're trying to make sure that we forthrightly, and this was part of the deal that is evidently not, or an agreement that is not the deal now, but to where the House and the Senate are trying to work together. The negotiations that took place in the White House may or may not have ever materialized to anything written down, but they did have discussions. This will enable the proper designation of representatives of both bodies to empower them to sit down with an agreement that it will require 7 votes.
The gentleman just yielded just for one. I guess my
I
problem,
would yield to the
Thank you
gentleman.
very much. I guess my problem with this whole thing is you've come up with a number, all right? And then you've said, we've come up with this number, and we're going to let somebody figure out how to make the cuts. I think a better way to do this is to go through these programs methodically and say, you know, maybe we need to make a cut here, maybe we need to increase here. But coming up with arbitrary numbers, you know, I don't think is the right way to go. And again, I would just tell you that I think it would have been better, at least from our side, if the chairman of the Budget Committee had been here to talk in more detail about the policy. That's my only point.
Well,
I think
reclaiming my time, I think if the gentleman, Mr. Ryan, were here, he would have to say that he's not been appointed a member of the committee. We've not passed the legislation. There's no way really to understand who would be appointed. But the point is, we're process-driven, and this institution is addressing the needs of the nation, and that is that we cannot continue spending more than what we make. We are in a nation where we spend more money on unemployment compensation than we are receiving revenue in by employers. And when you have more money that is outgoing for people who are hurting and on unemployment than money that is coming in from employers who are making money, that is a serious problem.
Thank you.
Wait, I just would be curious, how many people will lose their jobs as a result of the cuts that are made in this bill?
You know, I appreciate the gentleman asking a question. I don't know, but here's what I would tell you. What I would tell you is this nation has lost some 6 million net jobs that as a result of what I believe are policies directly related to President Obama and this House. And there's no way to get around that. I sat about where Mr. Hastings is when we did the bill in February of '09. And I read the report that came from the Joint Committee where it talked about the stimulus, the huge stimulus. And I went to page 8 or 9 of that report and talked about it. And several members of this committee accused me of trying to sabotage the bill. And I said, this is from your report where it talks about unemployment and debt will rise substantially and unemployment will occur. And it was directly from the report. And it was dismissed. We talk about whether you will accept information that comes from CBO or not. It was unilaterally dismissed by members on this side. Yet all I was doing was reading the majority report. So, look, we could stay here all night and debate this thing.
But we're not going to.
And we're not going to. But I think it's, in fairness, we ought to say it will be the process overrides what might be a bad thing, and good process is going to help
Let me
this
just say
institution.
that
I yield back my
having
time.
by unanimous vote, having just passed the McGovern amendment, the vote now occurs on the motion of the gentleman from Dallas. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Sessions. Aye. Mr. Sessions votes aye. Ms. Fox.
Aye.
Ms. Fox votes aye. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop votes aye. Mr. Woodall. Aye. Mr. Woodall votes aye. Mr. Nugent. Aye. Mr. Nugent votes aye. Mr. Scott. Aye. Mr. Scott votes aye. Mr. Webster. Yes. Mr. Webster votes aye. Ms. Slaughter.
No.
Ms. Slaughter votes no. Mr. McGovern.
No.
Mr. McGovern votes no. Mr. Hastings.
No.
Mr. Hastings votes no. Mr. Polis.
No.
Mr. Polis votes no. Mr. Chairman.
Aye. And the clerk will report the total.
8 yea, 4 nay.
And the motion is agreed to, and I'll be managing this for the majority.
And I will be managing.
And Mrs. Slaughter for the minority. Thank you all very much. I hope everyone has a great evening. Oh, yes. We don't have any more meetings planned for today. I just want you to know that. And, you know, what we'll do, you know, at this juncture, I think that a lot of it depends on how this issue before us is disposed of, and we will certainly keep the gentleman informed of what the schedule is. But we don't have anything set. Thank you all very much. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.